In the US, hundreds of Texas National Guard troops have arrived in Illinois, ordered there by President Trump. The president wants them deployed in Chicago, alleging lawlessness that he says Democrat officials have failed to control. Democratic governors accuse Mr. Trump of abusing his power. He has threatened the possibility of invoking the rarely used Insurrection Act if courts try to block him. Our correspondent David Willis is following developments.
This is the latest domestic deployment of National Guard troops by President Trump against the wishes of local Democratic lawmakers. 200 members of the National Guard from Texas have now arrived at an army training center on the outskirts of Chicago, and in the next few days will be joined by hundreds more from Texas and from the state of Illinois National Guard as well. And they will be used, the Pentagon says, to protect immigration facilities in Chicago and immigration personnel. Now, President Trump has been talking of deploying National Guard officers to Chicago for some time. He's described the city as a war zone, particularly following the protests that city has seen following the arrival of federal immigration officials who have set about rounding up illegal migrants. And some say that that basically has led to the manufacturing of a crisis by the Trump administration, the sending in of these heavily armed and masked agents, thus provoking a protest on the part of local people, which has in turn justified the deployment of members of the National Guard, even though the protests in many cases have been sparsely attended and largely peaceful. Opponents have also accused President Trump of seeking to extend the powers of the presidency by using National Guard troops in a role that they are prohibited from undertaking under federal law, namely civilian law enforcement. And in another Democratic city, Portland, the courts have recently issued a restraining order blocking the deployment of National Guard troops there. But instead of deterring President Trump, he is now threatening to use emergency powers under the so-called Insurrection Act, which allow him to bypass the courts and use members of the military to suppress rebellion in this country. While the mayor of the city of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, has called the deployment of National Guard troops to his city illegal, unconstitutional, and dangerous.